the general public does not know and does not care whether it took you 10 days to make a record, 10 weeks, or 10 years. It's the end result. It's the product that comes out. So they don't care about, well, the budget was only this big, that's why it didn't sound like, they don't, no. It's not going to, no. So whatever you have to do to make sure that it comes out the way you want it to come out, that's what you have to do. My goal was to really try to play with as many great musicians as possible. And the first session I ever did was in New York at Electric Lady Studios, where I played with the guys on the session, Nathan Watts on bass, who plays with Stevie Wonder, who's been Stevie Wonder's musical director for, 30 years. Michael Cimbello was on guitar, who was playing with Wonderlove, Stevie Wonder's band at the time. And Carlos Alomar, who was playing with David Bowie. So this is my first session. So I'm like, this is like, wow, I'm at Electric Lady. This is what I want to do. My second session was at the Hit Factory, which was unbelievable for me to have my second session be at the famous Hit Factory in New York. And that session, Leon Pendarvis was on keyboards, Anthony Jackson was on bass, and I believe Jeff Marinoff was on guitar. And that was maybe David Spinoza may have been on that as well. I'm not really sure. So that was my second session. So right then I knew, I just knew what I wanted to do. That was the caliber of musicianship that I was surrounded with at a very young age. And besides like the bands I grew up with playing in the Bronx and so on and so forth, that when I started doing sessions, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I learned a lot every day. Every measure of music I played, I was learning, because I was, the A-Team guys were like Steve Gadd and Rick Marotta, Chris Parker, Bernard Purdy, you name it. I mean, I'm missing, I'm not naming a million other players, but it was incredible, the amount of musicianship in New York. So just to get my foot in was a miracle in itself. And when I saw, I was playing with all these people, and then I did a record that there was a lot of time taken doing these rhythm tracks. I'll never forget this. It was a record that I was recording out in Jersey. My favorite studio at the time was the House of Music in West Orange, New Jersey, and late Charlie Conrad owned and ran that studio, and he taught me a lot about engineering. And so we were working on this record as a lot of hard work going into these tracks. It was a really big deal. And then when the record came out, it didn't sound as good as I thought it should sound. And I thought, I could do that, So I said, I really, in my ear, the production of this should have come out differently. So, and I was really into the record making process. So I always watched this when I started doing television. It was the same thing. I started looking at what everybody was doing and how they were doing it and who the best people were doing it and what their secrets were. And I would pick people's brains. I didn't have any problem asking a lot of questions. It was pretty much a little pest, actually. But I learned a lot, and I thought, I could do that. And I really loved the process. I love everything about recording, So that's really how I got into it. One of my favorite things is the creating of a track. I love it. This is a creative field, where you start out with sometimes nothing, or sometimes just the bare bones of a song, and then over time it blossoms into this thing, and hopefully it blossoms into something really good, and that's a wonderful thing to be at the end of the process and to hear it come out the way you'd like it to come out. Because see, as a side person, you can plan a lot of people's recordings and stuff, you don't get to, you don't have a say on how the thing comes out. So you may have aspirations of, or ideas about what it could have sounded like and stuff, but it doesn't mean that it's going to come out that way. I don't let some kind of technical thing stop when the creative energy is flowing. It's your job to capture that. As a producer, you're supposed to capture that energy, and then if you have to fix it later, whatever kind of thing, then you do that later. But if you don't have a performance, you don't have anything, so it doesn't really matter. I remember doing a session one time in the 80s on a huge artist. I mean, at the top of the world at that time, and we were cutting a track, and a piece of outboard gear broke down, and it stopped the session. And I could not believe that the session was brought to a halt because of this one piece of outboard gear breaking down on the time. And I could not believe what I was seeing and witnessing, and the amount of money that was being spent, and all of a sudden we're not recording because there's one reverb plate shut down. I just couldn't believe it. So that wasn't I learned something on that session, because I looked at all the musicians who were mostly upset and kind of befuddled by the whole thing, and then looking at, as a producer, waste. I mean, that's money you're paying for. Now you're not doing it. I mean, come on. And then the thing is, we were right there. We were right on the verge of getting the take, and then we're not going to do it because the reverb is not working. I mean, what is happening? So that was something that I never forgot. You have to have a good take on the pulse of the recording industry and what people like in a studio. For instance, I know people like coming here because it sounds so good. You want to be able to hear something that sound really good. So that's a positive thing, of the many positive things in this place. They're not going to go to a place that, you can do that at home. If you want something to sound terrible, you can do that anywhere. So people are going to have to come in with new ideas. The duality with all this great these great channel strips and stuff, that's a great idea. Having an incredible monitoring system, it's essential. Having a great environment, great lighting, great aesthetics, immaculate bathrooms, key to the recording. If you're going to go out of your house to record, or else you can stay home and record. I've known Troy for a very long time. I knew his father very well, and so the recording aspect is in the blood. So when Troy builds a studio, he's thinking of a lot of different things, not only the sonics, but the aesthetics and everything that goes into the recording environment is extremely important. So when I came here the first time to listen, and I think Russ Titleman had the same experience I had, because I talked to him about it afterwards. We listened to this playback system, and it was the best monitoring system we had ever heard in a studio. And we were just overwhelmed. And we started putting on everything that we had ever worked on and started feeling good about ourselves. It was like, yeah, all right, I'm not so bad after all. This is not bad. This sounds really good. And I could have done that for hours and days. And this is like a little kind of playground, because it sounds so good in both rooms, the playback system, that wow, it's like, okay, so this is the way it sounds. So, like, if it doesn't sound good, then your stuff doesn't sound good.